So I have to say, when I get invited to do these panels, they often call and say, well, Jen, we would love for you to talk about this new book that came out. It's about the history of soybean farming in the US and its connection to economic policy and democracy. And I say, oh, okay, that's cool. This time, they said, you want to do something fun? And I was like, talk to me. I had the great pleasure of immersing myself in Kennedy and Alexis writing over the course of 2 days. I just went complete armadillo. My husband was like, where is she? I was in your world. Mm-hmm. And it was delightful. It was warm and comforting and challenging and sexy. It was all the things. But Alexis, I want you to first just walk us through the plot of your latest book, Along Came Amor, and the love story that unfolds there between Roman Vasquez and Ava Rodriguez.
So first of all, thank you all for joining us tonight. And thank you to the National Book Festival for having us. So my latest book, Along Came Amor, came out a few months ago, and it centers around Ava Rodriguez, who is a divorced middle school teacher. And the story begins basically when her divorce is finalized. And she is at the point where she is just ready to move on with the rest of her life, but Ava is a planner, and she has no idea what that looks like, which is very uncomfortable for her. Enter Roman. He is kind of the perfect man. And they have this amazing night together, and she's like, okay, but that's it. Like, I'm keeping boundaries around this. I don't have boundaries in any other point in my life, but we're gonna have it here. And what follows is them falling in love. She's loosening her boundaries, but then she finds out that he is the best man in her cousin's wedding, her cousin Jasmine from the first book, You Had Me at Hola. And for Ava, this is a problem because she has vowed not to be involved with anybody that her family knows ever again. So there's a lot of like secret relationships sneaking around. She tries to break up with him, and then that doesn't really work. And then at the same time, they're also helping to plan this wedding because they are the best man and maid of honor. So yeah, it goes from there.
It's interesting in reading your books, they were very complementary. There are some shared themes between the two. Kennedy and Can't Get Enough, tell us about the love affair that involves there.
Yeah, so Can't Get Enough is the third book in my Skyland series. And so we've met these three friends, Yasmin, Soledad, and Hendrix, who book 3 is her book. And so, and thank you guys for being here. Thank you to the National Book Festival. I just dove right in, but it's good to see everybody. And so Hendrix from book 1, everybody's like, that's the party girl. That's our girl. She's the fun one. And she is, but when we get to her book, of course, you're unpacking all these different layers that maybe you didn't even know were there in the first 2 books. And so Hendrix she is an entrepreneur. She runs her own business. She is someone who gives back tremendously to her community. She runs a fund for Black women business owners. So she does that, and she is the rich auntie. You know, she's childless by choice. You know, she doesn't want children, doesn't plan on having children, but she's everybody's auntie. And she's an amazing daughter. Her mom is actually navigating Alzheimer's. And so we see her in the role of caregiver in so many aspects of her life. And then she meets Maverick Bell. You know, she is the kind of girl who is like, I have built an amazing life for myself, and I don't want to bring anybody into it who's going to ask me not to have this amazing life, or who's going to ask me to compromise, or who's going to detract from it. I'm fine all by myself. And she's not sure that there's someone who is fit to her and the way she's chosen to live her life. Enter Maverick Bell. And he's an amazing guy, but he is also, she is, for one of her clients, she manages like reality TV stars. And one of her clients has a show coming up, and the co-producer that she's working with used to date Maverick Bell. And so it gets sticky. It gets sticky, guys. But it's a journey, you know, about finding yourself, about knowing what you will and won't settle for. and also about the radical resistance of rest and putting yourself first.
Yeah. Which is a theme in both books. I think both of our protagonists has to learn how to prioritize her need, her want, her desire, even if it's about not having a plan right now. That's okay. How closely connected is that to your personal experience or the experience of the women in your lives? Either one.
The part about not having a plan?
more the part about prioritizing self, as a woman especially. Go ahead.
I have a 2-year-old right now.
Oh.
And I got pregnant, had the baby, all in the midst of writing this book. So there was a lot that, of my experience with that sort of, that then became Ava's a little bit. Like, I didn't know what Ava's happily ever after was going to look like. Like, obviously she was going to have one, and I knew that I wanted her to have this, like, really, like, sort of fairy tale romance. But then, of course, it's like, well, what does that really look like? Because the fairy tales don't have the traditional romance structure that we're writing in our books. So I came up with Roman, where he really was someone who was just always going to support her, which is not great for writing conflicts, because then you have to get really clever with it. But I was like, what does Ava want from her life? And part of the problem was that she didn't know either. And I think for me, sort of figuring out, what do I want? What does this look like for me? Helped me figure it out for her. And certainly with having a baby, you know, it's like somebody else's priorities take center stage in a big way. But I really also had to, like, be very clear about, like, okay, this is what I can and can't do right now. And for Ava, the book really is about her learning to have better boundaries with her family. She's the person who is constantly giving. Anytime somebody in the family needs something, they turn to her, and she always says yes. And she has to learn how to say no to protect herself in that way.
Kennedy, what about for you?
Yeah, I think that it's really a discipline. Like, self-care is a discipline, and it's not one that I'm great at all the time. So I really recognize myself in a lot of my heroines who are ambitious and bold and dreamers and who pursue their dreams and their goals, sometimes to the detriment of, like, their personal care, and they're like, okay, I got to figure this out. That is something that I would say that's been a struggle for me my whole life. I call myself type A minus. Not quite type A, but a lot type A. Recently, I think this has been really resonant for me. Recently, I had to cancel all of my travel and my appearances for the last quarter of the year, which was an incredibly difficult decision for me. Incredibly difficult, but my husband is better at taking care of me than I am of taking care of myself sometimes. And he knew, you know, I was on the road 34 weeks last year, and I've already been on the road like maybe 20 weeks, a little over that already this year. And I battle depression. And when I don't sleep, when I don't rest, when I don't prioritize myself, my mental health begins to suffer for it. And so my husband is very vigilant. And I try to be, but sometimes he's like my vigilant, and he's like, babe, okay, so we need to prioritize rest. And so that's something that I've really had to do this year, even recently. And it's something that Hendrix and a lot of my heroines struggle with. So yeah, it hits home for me.
It's interesting, both Roman and Maverick share this desire to serve. They want to serve their families, they want to serve their communities, they want to serve the women they love. But what's really fascinating about the way you both wrote these characters is that there's also this recognition. In Roman's case, he has to learn this, that they cannot fix everything for the women they love, that they have to take a step back and figure out that balance between support and fixing. And that realization for Roman is really key in his character development, him coming to that realization, oh, I'm a fixer, but maybe I just need to stop myself. Take me through his character evolution.
So writing Roman, so Roman was actually the third hero that I came up with for Ava in this book. I restarted this book 3 times. because it wasn't ever right. And that is a really hard thing to have to tell your publisher. Be like, sorry, I'm starting the book over again from scratch. And it's going to be late again. But sometimes that's what you have to do. So, like I said, I was looking at it from this perspective of, I want her to have a fairy tale romance. What does that look like? It's someone who constantly supports her and who is always there when she needs him to be. And at the same time, she is someone who is not good at receiving help. She's very good at giving it, but she is the one who's like, no, I'm fine. I don't need anything. All he wants to do is just like make her life great. And she has a really hard time letting that happen. So in terms of his arc, I had to say, okay, well, he's going to have POV chapters, like he's got to have something going on as well. He is someone who has worked his way up from very humble beginnings. What's going on with him? Like, what's driving him? And what I settled on was that his drive is to take care of his family, but to a point where it's like at the detriment of everything else, right? He has put off everything else in his life to work to take care of his family. And he wants to continue doing that for her, but then he realizes, I can't have the life with her that I want to have if I'm constantly working, if I'm constantly traveling, if I'm not actually here. And this message comes to him from the other men in the book, who are the heroes from the previous books in the series. We're like, you just have to be there. Be there. Don't try to fix it for her. Don't try to fix her. Just be there.
They had to physically restrain him at
one
point.
They do physically restrain him at one point. Gabe puts him in a headlock. And that's the lesson that he has to learn. He also has this like inner child moment that like still makes me cry when I read this scene, where he like has to give himself permission to rest. He's like, I've got this, you have done enough. And his mother also tells him, she's like, I let you take on too much too early and I shouldn't have done that. Like you need to take a break. So that's really where his arc is.
Yeah. Maverick is a little different. And reading Maverick, I will confess, okay, so a little spoiler alert. It's not really a spoiler alert, it's just a plot point. His previous lover wanted children, wants children, and Maverick is very clear that he does not want them.
Want anymore.
Anymore. He has a daughter who's an adult, essentially. And that's a key point of friction in their relationship. Not the only point, but a key point. And it was a little challenging. I had a flashback to my 20s, y'all. Reading the interactions between them where he's being really clear with his ex about what he wants and what he doesn't want. And she's not hearing him. And she's calculating the time they've spent together and saying, how did I come out on the other side of this with nothing? And it would be very easy to make him a villain, but he's not.
Right.
Talk about his evolution as a character.
Yeah, I think that he is someone who, he's very ambitious. He's very goal-oriented. There are things that he wants to do that very few people are doing. He's a black man who wants to own a professional basketball team. And that's something that's a driving force for him at that point in the book. And it's not like he changed his mind about having kids and strung her along. Like he told her from the very beginning, that's not where I am. I'm 40 years old. I'm ready to move on. He was a dad very young. So he already has a daughter who's, graduated, ready to move on. And he's like, I don't want to do that again. And she does. But that is an evolution for her too. Like at the beginning, she's fine with that. And then her 40th birthday approaches and she realizes this is something I really want. I think it took a lot for Maverick to articulate to her with as much compassion as he could, but still holding on to not compromising what he knew was a happy future for him. And I think that's something that we see with him and with Hendrix. Both of them are very clear about what their futures are, and we're very fortunate that their futures are compatible in a way that his and Zare's aren't. But as the book goes on, there are other ways that he realizes he and Zare aren't compatible. But I think the challenge for him is figuring out how to be the support for Hendrix. He is a very wealthy man, and his money won't fix everything. And it was really, I think that's something he learns. And of course, as I mentioned, Hendrix's mother has Alzheimer's, and his grandfather had Alzheimer's, and it's something they kind of connect around, and he's a huge support to her as she's navigating that. So yeah, I think he's just figuring that out and figuring out how to be very clear but compassionate with someone he really cares about, but they don't want the same things.
Yeah. There are some really interesting dynamics within the family, both families. And when we talk about Hendrix navigating Alzheimer's with her mother, if anyone who's had a loved one who's suffered from Alzheimer's or another type of dementia, it is so challenging and painful to watch someone you love slip away piece by piece. And that part of your storytelling is so true. It's so real. What's really beautiful about it, though, is the way community comes around Hendrix. And that also felt very true. What did you tap into for that part of the book?
I think I tapped into my own experience growing up. Even as I've been writing this entire Skyland series, I realized though the friendship that's there, it's one that a lot of us aspire to, and it's what I saw my mom have and create when I was growing up. That's what her friendships looked like. I remember when one of her best friends was diagnosed with cancer while she was pregnant, and the doctors urged her to terminate the pregnancy, and she refused to do so. And they said, well, that, first of all, neither one of you has like high chances, but that's drastically decreasing your chances of survival, and it was what she wanted to do. My mom's a preacher. And so I just remember anybody who came in who was like, well, this isn't a good idea, or this, she was like, nope, 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 Faith, outside. That's my mom, outside, and I remember her, she had 2 other children. I remember mom cooking dinner for her and all of her friends coming around her. And that's just what my mom does, and that's who she's always been and the kind of women she surrounded herself with. And so, if there is somebody who, has a death in the family, there's going to be casseroles. There's going to be lots of food. If there's somebody who's in the hospital, my mom is there. She's going to be there by the bedside. She's going to be praying. All of that. So I think I grew up with a very strong sense of community, and I think I bring that into the stories that I write, because for me, also, each of these women are on healing journeys. Yasmin, of course, in the first book is recovering from depression and a difficult divorce, and Soledad, a trash husband, and she is really reclaiming her power and figuring out who she wants to be going forward, and learning to love herself, to love other people better. And with Hendrix, she has all of this that she is managing, and each of them have a healing journey. I have found that so much of healing takes place in the context of community, healing with other people, healing with the support of other people, healing with the wisdom of other people, healing with the compassion of other people. And so I don't create healing journeys that are disconnected from others.
Yeah. So that's an interesting segue, Alexis, to Ava's story, because Ava is fighting tooth and nail not to heal. That's how she's like, I can just maintain. Everything's fine. I can continue to respond to everyone's need. I will just fix my face. That's what we call it. Girl, fix your face. I'll just fix my face and keep taking, the jabs and the criticisms and the abuse, and everything's fine. Everything's fine. What did you tap into to really get underneath? Because that easily could have just been very pat, but you tapped into this really deep fear that I think a lot of us struggle with around disappointing the people we love, around being too much or not enough. And that too felt very little too real. Felt a little too real, yeah.
So Ava really struggles a lot with perfectionism, which relatable. And she especially does not want to disappoint her grandmother. And this all goes back to how she grew up. She lived with her grandmother for a time. And for me, this was very true to life. Like, my grandmother was a huge influence in my life. And I remember there would be things where, you know, I'd ask my mom something and she'd be like, no, because I don't want to hear it from your grandmother. And I was like, she doesn't even live here. Like, what? But she was just such a force. And that's really sort of what I've modeled the matriarch in this family around. And for Ava, she's so worried about losing her family's love that she is unwilling to basically live her life the way that she wants to, because she's afraid of what they'll do and what they'll say. And I think, so I'm not like Ava. I'm actually more like Michelle from the second book, where she's like kind of blunt. But that was my response to like growing up in a big Puerto Rican family where everybody wants to tell you what to do. Ava is the...
I heard that. Somebody said,
Yeah, right? You know it's true. But Ava really internalizes all of that. And she is, you know, like she calls it resting pleasant face, right? And Roman's like, is that the opposite of? And she's like, yes. Because she just like puts it on and then she's like, fine, whatever anybody needs. And she just like buries everything down. And to write her, I really had to like dig into what was underneath all of that. Because otherwise from the outside, she just looks like the perfect one. She's the perfect daughter, the perfect sister, the perfect grandchild, you know, the perfect cousin, all of that. But inside, she's just like sort of screaming internally. And lost my train of thought, sorry. It's very late for me. I'm usually putting my kids to bed right now. She is, you know, it goes back to the boundaries issue as well. But I really lost it.
that's okay. That's okay. That is okay. It'll come back.
It'll come back.
And when it comes back, we'll go back.
Sorry, mom brain.
No, perfect. This is a safe space, very safe space.
Thank you.
In both of your books, there is the central love story, but then there's also the love story of the friendships. And it was so refreshing and just beautiful. It made me miss my sister friends. This my group of six friends who are just like my soulmates. Like the youngest friendship in our group is at this point 48, 50 years, like 50 years. Yeah, that's the youngest. Not the youngest, I'm sorry, I'm not that old, y'all. The oldest friendship is 50 years. The youngest is, I think, 30 years, 30, wow. 35, so something like that. Ooh, somebody was doing math. They were like,
like, wow.
I know, wow, she looks amazing. But reading those friendships and reading the text exchanges, I was like, did they tap into my phone? Like, it was beautiful. But it also made me think, like, these are women who have women in their lives. These are women who have that connection with other women, because you can't make that up, right? You got to understand it inside. Who are those women in your life, Kennedy?
Oh, I have, there are some, I grew up with my cousins. First of all, I'm from the country. Like, my shoes are like halfway already off. People make fun of me because as soon as I sit down, I kick my shoes off. I'm a country girl. And so I grew up with, in a very rural place where literally, and so if you're from a space like this, you'll recognize what I'm saying immediately. Your whole family lives around you. Like all your neighbors up the street, everybody is somehow related to you. And so I had two first cousins who lived next door, and we were like sisters. And our parents basically raised each of us. They're still really deeply embedded into my life. There's someone who was my maid of honor. I have been married 28 years, so it's a very long friendship. And then my best friend who was here today, who is a fellow author, like I've just been kind of collecting people along the way. But I believe that relationships are concentric. And what I mean by that is you have this really tight inner circle that may only be a few people. And then as you get out, you know, the circles get bigger and bigger, and the connection gets looser. That group, that nucleus of women, I can be completely myself with, and I feel very safe with, and they don't judge me, but they also hold me accountable. And I think that you need women like that. I don't need a lot of them. Like, the older I get, the smaller that circle needs to be. I don't need 15 people like that. If I have a good 4 or 5, I'm set. And that's one thing that really keeps me grounded, and you know, keeps me feeling safe. And there are times when things get really hard. And of course, my husband is there for me. Sometimes you just need a woman's perspective. And I'm glad to have that group of women in my life.
Yeah. Alexis, what about for you?
I mean, very similar. You know, like your cousins are your first friends.
Yes.
And that was something that I really wanted to explore with this series. It's why it's the primas of power.
Yeah.
Primas means cousins. And it's like they're your first friends. Those are the people you sort of learn how to build friendships from. And that was, but at the same time, it's like, there are the people that are closest to, but you sometimes don't still tell them everything, or you don't tell them everything yet. And that was something that I wanted to look at with these 3 cousins, Jasmine, Michelle, and Ava, where it's like, they tell each other everything, but then they also don't tell each other everything. And what are the things that they're holding back, and why? And how do they manage it when it all comes out, right? Because I think that it's not just about the relationship conflict, it's also like the friendship bonds and the family bonds, and how you navigate those sort of rocky moments as well and come out stronger on the other side. So that was something that I wanted to show in this series. I have strong cousin bonds. One of my cousins is getting married right now, and so we've been having a lot of conversations about it. And like, I even told her, I was like, look, I know you have like a small like group of people you can invite. I was like, if I can't make, and she was like, no, you were number 2 on the list after my mom. Don't worry. So yeah, I think, you know, because it's like, you're not just friends, you're family, and you're not just family, you're friends. And that's like a really special bond.
Yeah. Kennedy, when did you know you were a writer?
Oh, very young. I didn't anticipate writing fiction for a long time. I started writing poetry when I was really young. I found some of my father is like a president of, he's in higher education administration, so he's been president of HBCUs, like a few HBCUs, and Mr. PhD, Mr. Buttoned Up, you know, and I found poetry like in our garage one day, and it was like amazing poetry. And I asked my mom, who wrote this? She's like, your dad. I'm like, my dad? Him? You know, and it just got me, I don't know, it sparked something in me, and I was like, well, maybe I'll write poetry, and I started writing poetry, and then I realized that I wanted to go into journalism, and so when I was 17 years old, I was a senior in high school, I started writing for my city newspaper. I was writing editorials. My frontal lobe was not even developed, so I don't know why they would trust me with an editorial, you know. But it really cut my teeth for writing in public spaces, and then also critique and, you know, and pushback in public spaces, which is great training for when you're an author. And so I got my degree in journalism, and, you know, did freelance writing, did ghost writing, did technical writing, PR, like all of that. But fiction really didn't occur to me. What happened was my son was diagnosed with autism when he was 2 years old. And I had left romance. I started reading romance when I was in the 8th grade, like young. And my mom, I already told you she was a preacher, and she was like, you ain't bringing the devil in my house." You know, I'm like, "Dang, Mom," you know. And so I would smuggle romance novels into the.
Listen, my father was a preacher. We were talking about hiding books under the bed.
Yes, exactly.
Yes, 100%.
Hiding books under the bed, smuggling them out of clothes, in the back of the closet, snuffing them in the mattress. And so I was an avid romance reader. Later on in life, you know, you get to college and you read the serious books, and I kind of abandoned abandon romance. But when my son was diagnosed with autism, there was just a lot that I had to do. And then I started a foundation for families who have children with autism. I ran that for about 11 years. And then most of my writing was around autism advocacy and autism parenting and special needs. And so my whole life was that. And I felt like I needed an escape. So I went back to reading romance. And when I went back to reading romance, I was like, I am a writer. Maybe I should give it a try, you know? And that's kind of how it evolved into me writing fiction.
Wow. Alexis, what about for you?
I also started writing very early, but I was an artist, right? That was just like the thing that I always did. I took art classes. I went to, I grew up in New York. If you know the movie Fame, I
Yes.
went to the same school, but I went for fine arts. I was not singing and dancing in the hallways. I was, I don't know, like drawing all the time. You know? So that was really like my identity. But I always wrote, and I started writing fanfic in high school in the 90s, before fanfiction.net even existed. So it was definitely before AO3. And from there, I sort of like found online writing groups, and I did that for a long time. And I sort of always had this like dream that like someday I would be published, and I was like, I'm going to be published by the time I'm 30, but I wasn't really doing anything to make that happen. So instead, the year that I turned 30, I was like, okay, I've been writing all of this time. I started so many books, and I've never actually finished one. So this is the year that I'm going to reach the end on a manuscript. And I did. I had to skip over a bunch of scenes, and it was very messy. But that was also the year that I wrote my first romance. It is not published, and it never will be. Don't ask. It was a Regency historical, and it was very difficult to write. But like I was hooked from that point on. And then from there, I was like, okay, what do I need to learn, right? I have a degree in art. I have a degree in computer arts, but I've never actually studied writing. Like, what do I need to learn? So I went to conferences, I signed up for workshops, I read craft books, sort of like tried to fill in those gaps. You know, learning how to finish a book, learning how to revise a book, learning how to get an agent, like doing all of those things. So then my first book came out when I was 34, so I wasn't that far off from my original goal.
Thank
you.
What about your writing practice? What, do you have one? You made a face, Kitty, like, girl?
No, I do. It has evolved as I have figured out what works best for me. My creative process, first of all, and I think it's just my journalism background, it's very much grounded in research and interviews. So what my process looks like is, and people will often say like I hear writers say, authors say, oh my gosh, at any given time I have like 14 novels in my head. You know, like I have all these books, I just can't get them out fast enough. I always have one thing, one book at a time in my head. And people will say, you know, what inspires you? And I always say I'm more incited because I don't just walk around with ideas. Something usually happens in the world that triggers me to say, I want to talk about that. And because I'm a romance author, I'm going to talk about it in the context of my genre. But it's usually something that's happening in the world that spurs me to write a story. And so usually the story comes before the characters. You know, like I don't have like, oh my gosh, this girl is amazing. I have in my mind, this is the conversation I want to have with my readers. This is the discourse I want this story to push. And so I start researching the topic, the issue, whatever the thing is that's at the heart of that discourse. I start researching it a lot. And then as a journalist, I draft my list of subjects. Who are the people I'm going to interview as I talk about this? And generally, they're people who are living those experiences. Like right now, I'm writing a bipolar character. So I've read like 6 memoirs on, you know, bipolarity. And I've been interviewing psychiatrists, interviewing therapists, interviewing people who are living with bipolar. I usually do that by Zoom, and then once I've done all of that, I go back and I watch all the interviews, and the characters really start to take shape, and the story starts to take shape, and I ask myself, who is the best person to tell this story? And if it's a woman and a man, and it's that woman at the center, and then I say, and who is the man who deserves her? You know, and so that's kind of how I start to build that story out.
Yeah. And I think, now that you've explained that, I have an inkling what the inciting incident may have been in your book. Would you care to share?
Which there's a few.
Okay, okay.
Yeah,
I'm thinking about a central plot point around the investment firm.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, the Fearless Fund.
Yeah.
As I mentioned, Hendrix has, she has a fund that basically helps women, Black women specifically, who are building their businesses. Her fund, she and her sorors established this to help them. And I'm not sure if you guys have heard of the Fearless Fund or before. I mean, the Fearless Fund is not the only fund that's under attack, but I lived in Atlanta, and it was the one that was really getting a lot of national headlines. And there is an attack on equity, you know, in higher education, in other areas. And so literally this fund was sued by a legal firm, the same legal firm that basically took higher education all the way to the Supreme Court. It's the same legal firm that is looking for any arena of equity to attack, frankly. And they basically sued the Fearless Fund, which is a group of Black women there to serve Black women. They sued them for racial discrimination.
Yeah. In an environment where Black women get less than 1%.
Less than 1% of investment.
Yeah.
Yes. And so basically we're in a climate where the very laws that were put in place to help close generational wealth gaps and other social gaps because of our, as Black people, our history in this country, those very laws are being turned on us now. And so when I saw that, I don't think I can say pissed. It made me mad. It made me mad. And I knew that Hendrix, you know, that was something that she was passionate about, and I kind of layered it in because I wanted to discuss it, and I wanted to interrogate. I want people interrogating their beliefs around it, and I want people to be aware that it's happening, and that, as far as I'm concerned, it's not acceptable. Yeah, and what was really, really special for me was a few weeks ago, the Fearless Fund sent me flowers to thank me for raising that issue in the book. So that was honestly one of the biggest things of the year for me, was the Fearless Fund sending those flowers to me. It was very special.
Yeah. Alexis, what about you? Your writing practice?
I mean, it's definitely different now that I have a toddler. My preferred method, I am not somebody who writes every day. I have always wished that I could be, right? Because I mean, it sounds great. The people who are like, I get up in the morning, I write 1,000 words, and then I go about the rest of my day, and I just do that every day until I have a book. That sounds amazing.
It does.
That's not what I do. I spend a lot of time ideating, brainstorming, outlining. I write a lot of, I do a lot of pre-writing. So I write like scenes from when the characters were children, like when they have turning point moments where their like inner wounds sort of take shape and get cemented throughout their lives. If the characters know each other before the story starts, I have to write scenes that were like important to their relationship before the book begins, so that I can know it before I start writing and can reference it. So I spend a lot of time doing that, and also like avoiding sitting down to actually start writing. But then once I do, I drop everything else, and I live and breathe the book, and I live at my desk basically until it's done, and then I kind of drop. And I can't really do that anymore. So it's been a challenge of like carving out the time and then sitting down and having to get immediately focused, which is really difficult for me. And then also sort of like relying on the people around me. Like I tell my partner, I'm like, okay, I really need to like make a lot of progress this week, so you just have to like take her out every day. Right? So she gets lots of time at the playground or the museum. I'm like, take her to every museum that is within walking distance, right? We live in New York. There's a lot of museums. I just did this recently. You know, my in-laws were going away, and I was like, can you guys take her for an entire weekend before you go so that I can like get a lot of work done? She goes, and then I just work. So that's sort of what I have to do now.
Yeah, yeah. I'm sure we have some writers in the audience today. I'm curious to hear from each of you where you see both the challenges and the opportunities in publishing romance in this moment. Kennedy?
I think there's a lot of both. I think that we have, and I'm speaking specifically as a Black woman who is navigating traditional publishing. I'm a hybrid author, meaning I am self-published, an indie author, but I also have traditionally published books. So I've kind of been on both sides of, and am always on both sides of that. I see so many opportunities right now, especially with indie romance. Black indie romance is exploding, and it's experiencing a revolution that I think sometimes traditional publishing overlooks. The reason I say that is because, and the reason I think that we're seeing that as such an opportunity is because a lot of times, not all the time, but a lot of time in traditional publishing, we as Black women, as women of color, as marginalized voices, are sometimes asked to squeeze into certain spaces, or our voices are sometimes changed, or the way our books are marketed may not be, from my perspective, with the person who's most likely to buy it in mind, you know? And when you are self-publishing, when you're an indie author, you're in control of that completely. And what I see is specifically Black and brown women curating an experience, a reading experience, with their most, the reader most likely to buy, which is a Black woman, in mind. When they create their covers, when they're writing their stories, when they're marketing, like they get to completely curate that space. And a lot of times as Black women writing in traditional publishing, we are being asked to squeeze into a space that may not be designed for us. And that's not how you celebrate Black love. That's not how you promote it. And so I think a lot of times in traditional publishing, we're swimming upstream a little bit. I'm very fortunate to have a publisher who understands that I don't have bosses anymore. I have partners, you know, and so, and that's not to be arrogant, but I would never have entered back into traditional publishing if I knew that my publisher did not see me as a partner and not someone that they could reshape into their idea of what I was supposed to be, or their idea of what my stories were supposed to be. And so I see amazing opportunities on the side, especially in indie publishing. I think in traditional publishing, one of our challenges is visibility. I mean, you look at the big box stores, and you know, when I look at some of my white counterparts, I walk into the store and there's walls of their books from 6 months ago. And I, as a Black author, or Black or brown or queer authors who just released a book last week, I can't find it. You know, and that's a problem. You know, it's a problem. And I'm a New York Times bestseller. My books have been optioned for television. I have won awards that nobody who looks like me has won. You know? Like, I know who I am. And yet, every time I release a book, I feel like I'm starting all over. With retailers, with the industry, not with my readers, because my readers and I have an understanding. But as a Black author, I feel like I'm constantly having to prove myself over and over and over again. And so if I'm experiencing that, and I am arguably at the top of the game, then I know that other people are. Yeah. And that's where my efforts and my compassion and my activism as an author, that's where I'm focusing my energy.
I just want to hear from you. Thank you. I want to hear from you on that as well. But while we're taking this answer, we do have about 15 minutes for Q&A. So if you have questions, if you can start to line up at the 2 microphones here in front, and we'll get to as many questions as we can. Go ahead.
I mean, a lot of what Kennedy says, it's true. I think the challenge is that publishing knows how to market to this readership, right? They have their readership and they just market to that group, and it's like, but what about the people who would read our books if they knew about it? Yeah. They don't know how to reach it, or they're not willing to think of different ways to do that. I think one of the opportunities with romance, and this is less on the publishing side, but I think more of like a genre thing, is that we're able to write books that at the core are a romance. Like, they are a traditionally structured romance novel. They are hitting all of the romance beats, but they are also dealing with all of the other things that we're able to bring to our books, while also being a funny, fun, sexy, emotional, satisfying romance with a happily ever after, right? So Kennedy is putting all of the things that she's putting into her books. Like, I'm able to explore all of the things that I want to explore about Latina family dynamics, and like being a creative in the world. Like these are big themes for me with the Primas of Power series. I can do all of that and have the romance still be there at the center. But it is hard to write books like that, right? I often think like if I were just writing a romance novel where they didn't have any family members, right? This might be so easy. You know, it's hard to have all of that stuff in there and have it be seamless and have it be relevant to the story and not just like feel like it's packed in. And I just have to say, and can't get enough, the way that you incorporate the conflict into the story is masterful. I was listening and I was like, this is so good. I just can't even believe it.
Coming from you.
But it really takes a tremendous amount of work that it wouldn't be what, you know, and then sometimes I read other books where I'm like, how come this person doesn't have any friends, right? Where they're like, I go to my job or I don't talk to anybody, and then I go home and I'm all alone, and then I meet this one guy and like he barely talks to me either, but then we fall in love.
And we have a baby in the epilogue.
Right, yeah, the end. And I'm like, God, that sounds easy. But, you know, that's not the kind of book that I'm trying to write. You know, that's not what we're trying to put out into the world. So I think that is an opportunity and a challenge as well, just on a genre level.
Yeah, that's good.
Let's come here first.
Hi, so I just wanted to first thank both of you for the amazing novels that you've written that help Black and Latino communities feel seen in a world that makes us feel like we're the big minority. So first I just wanted to thank you for that. Alexis, my question for you is, what was the fanfic that you wrote? And Kennedy, have you written one? And if you haven't, what would you write it about?
What was your? You said you wrote the fanfic, Alexis.
I know,
you put it out there.
So it was this book series from the 90s that never got finished. So there was a lot of fanfic that developed from it. It was called The Night World by L.J. Smith, who wrote The Vampire Diaries. It doesn't exist anywhere. Like, don't look for it.
Kennedy, have you indulged?
I have never written fanfic, but if I did, it would probably be Buffy, the Vampire Slayer. I am Team Spike, and if you're not, argue with the wall. So that's probably what that's the world I would probably, I love vampires. So if you haven't watched Interview with the Vampire, you should. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Brooklyn. Thank you for the conversation today. My question is for Kennedy. And can't get enough, I love how the series closed with each woman finding love while also deepening their own healing journey. What stood out the most was the friendship rooted in honesty, tough love, and pushing each other towards what was best. By the end, the bond seemed to be just as strong as the romantic love. Since a lot of stories seem to consist of women being male-centered, how intentional was it for you to end the series with the friendship and unconditional love at its core?
Incredibly intentional. I mean, I think that is a thread that is woven throughout all three books. And they refer to each other as platonic soulmates. And so for me, and you see it kind of as a theme throughout the books, that I see other forms of love just as important as romantic love. And I think that we focus and I write romance. I've been married for 28 years. Like, I get it. Romantic love is important. But I also think that there's a lot of times that we put so much focus on romantic love to the detriment of other aspects of our life: familial love, friendship, self-love, loving yourself, which is something, and this could be us, that is, really grounding. So it's incredibly intentional. Like, I wrote, and some people don't realize this, Before I Let Go is the first book I ever wrote. It was not even before the first book that I wrote that was published. So I wrote Before I Let Go maybe 17 years ago. And it was only published in 2022 because my husband was like, what about that divorce book you never, And I was like, oh, babe, that book is trash. And I dug it back out, and it was trash. And part of it really was. I had to kind of take it down to the studs and rebuild it. And part of the problem was there was all of this hurt without the healing. Like, there was the depression and there was the loss, but there wasn't any therapy, and there was no healing. And also that friendship, that core friendship, wasn't there. And there's so much I've learned in like 18 years or however many years about healing, about mental health, about being a great mom, about being a better wife, about being a better friend, about healing in the context of community, there's so much that I'm so glad I didn't try to publish that book before I learned those things. And I always say that this series was waiting for me to grow up. And so if I had put this series out into the world without that core friendship, I don't believe it would have the same impact that I see it having, and it certainly wouldn't have been as transformative for me as a writer and as a woman as it has been.
And I just have to note, before we go to the next question, one of the things I appreciated, especially in your book, Alexis, was the fact that those friendships were understood and honored by the men in the book. They understood. When I got married, I told my husband, you need these women. Like, you need them.
Yeah.
I need them, but you need them. and the understanding of that in the mix, because that's often overlooked in books. And I just had to make sure I mentioned that. Go ahead.
Hello. Thank you both for being here. My question is specifically for Kennedy. First of all, I would love to say, you spoke about fitting into areas that aren't necessarily meant for us, and I think Hendrix is the epitome of that. Like, she was like, I'm not backing down, this is who I am, I don't want kids, and no, you can't make me have them. But I have, and this is not like some age gap trope, but I love Chris Bell and how you were able to portray his and Maverick's relationship, but also his and Hendrix's. So my question is, did you base Chris Bell off of someone that is in your life also?
You know, not anyone specifically. I think I just based Chris Bell off of good men, you know, who are compassionate men. And sometimes people are like, oh my gosh, where'd you find these guys to write these books based on? And I'm like, I have good men in my life. You know, I have an amazing husband. I have an amazing father. I have uncles. I have friends. And I think Chris Bell is just someone who is a good man, who's compassionate, and who really wants his son to be happy, and sees something in Hendrix that he believes will make his son happy. And I think they have a special relationship, you know? And people are always like, write Chris's romance, you know? who is Maverick's daddy's girl, you know? And I'm like, they're like Bolton Skipper, and then they're like Maverick's, you know, dad. So I'm like, you guys, y'all have me writing in Skyland forever.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for that question. Go ahead.
Good evening. Thank you, ladies, for today's conversation. I know, Alexis, you had touched on this a little bit earlier, and I wanted to get Ms. Ryan's point of view as well. For those of us who are aspiring writers as well later in life, what advice would you give us and where to start?
Yeah, I mean, I think the start is start. The start is start, and figure out how to finish, because so many people are like, oh my gosh, I've wanted to write a book for years, and I just never. Finishing a book is really hard, and it requires discipline, especially if you are working a job. You know, when I wrote my first novel that was published, I was working full-time, and I was running a foundation for families who have children with autism. I would get up at, you know, a few hours before the rest of my family, and I would write, and I would stay up a few hours after they went to sleep to continue to write. I had to squeeze it in, so it took discipline. I would also say, get you a cohort, you know? That looks different. Like, it could be something very organized. Like when I first started, there was a writer's group, a formal writer's group that I was a part of. But now I know there are a lot of writers who like get up in the morning and they write on Zoom with like 4 or 5 other women, you know, or 4 or 5 other authors. Like, or maybe it's just like online, like I'm writing, I have a friend who we do sprints together, and we're not on Zoom or anything. We just go, okay, set your clock for 45 minutes. We write, and as soon as we're done, hey, how many words did you get? Like, find you some kind of community of writers who will hold you accountable and inspire you. But my biggest advice is understand your why. Like, figure out why you are writing. And I say that as someone who kind of stumbled into writing fiction, and at first was kind of aimless. And I don't think it was until maybe around my 5th book or so that I really was like, why does this feel hollow to me? Like, why do I feel like it's not about the craft, it's not about how well I'm writing, it's about the fact that what I'm writing doesn't mean enough to me. And so when I figured out, okay, I really want to write from the margins to the center. I want to write about communities and experience that have been peripheralized, that aren't being seen in cultural narrative enough. That's who I want to write about. I want to write about Black women, brown women, fat women, disabled women, chronically ill women, neurodiverse women. I want to write about amputees. I want to write about people whose experiences are not being depicted enough. And when I honed in on that and I understood that was my why, it added so much meaning to my work, but also it added so much focus. So I wasn't looking to the left or right about what anybody else was writing. I was very clear on what I wanted to do. And when people say, well, you know, your books make me cry, I would like it if it was this. And I'm like, you know what, sweetheart, there's so many books out there like that. Go read those. I write this.
Yeah.
I'm very clear on it. And what it has done is it has created a brand of storytelling that my readers recognize. They're like, okay, when you read a Kennedy Ryan book, it's gonna be this, it's gonna be this, it's gonna be this, that's it, you know?
Alexis, I want to hear from you too on both the advice and also the why.
So I also need to know what it is that I'm doing and why. And when I started the Primas of Power series, it started with a question where I wrote down in a notebook. I was on an airplane. I wrote down, what do I want to be known for? And what came to me was 3 cousins from New York City who all have different blocks against love. They're all from the same family, and yet the dynamics from that family have affected each of them in different ways. And how is that showing up for them? And how is it affecting their bond? And then that's what that series was. I have not yet figured out what the next question is to answer it for what I'm doing next, so that's the space that I'm in. But what I would say to you, all of what Kennedy said, especially find your community, find at least a buddy, but also trust your story, trust that you have something to say and that it is worth saying and being heard, because what you have inside is worth being heard by others.
Thank you.
I think we have time to squeeze in one more question really quickly.
What do you think about modern romance novels being very explicit in some areas?
What do you say?
What do you think about modern romance novels being very explicit in some areas?
Oh. I think you mean spicy.
Yes.
You know, I think there are some romance novels that are explicit, and then there are some what we call closed-door romances that aren't. I think there's a range of that experience of what is actually written on the page and what may be implied. There's a range for people can figure out, do I want something that's spicier, or do I want something? I don't like when people call it clean. I don't like when people call romance clean because it doesn't depict a sexual experience. It can be closed door, it can be off page, it can be whatever. But I think that there's a range of that depiction, and that it's something that readers can find for themselves. Like if they want something that's spicier, I think we have that.
Yeah.
I mean, there are lots of writers that do. And then there are, I mean, everything up to Christian romance that might not have anything. So I think there's a real range, and I think that, you know, people should be able to decide what they want to read.
Well, your books are open door and on the page.
The door is open.
The door is open, the page is there. As we wrap, just really quickly, as I was reading, I was like, I wonder if there's anybody in their lives who they're like, Auntie, don't read this book. Or like skip pages 173 to 182. Is there anybody in your life who...
Yeah, my dad. I don't let my dad read my books. And he's like, when are you going to write something I can read? And I'm like, not yet, sorry.
Don't hold your breath.
Kennedy, anybody who's on
My mom, I mean, preacher girl, you know, she's like, my mom owns all of my books and has not read any of them.
That's a good mama.
She started with one and she was like, why'd they have to cuss? I said, oh, Mom, like, that's the least of it.
My dad said the same thing. It was like, I didn't like that she used the F word. And I was like, well, you're really not going to like what happens at the middle. Stop reading now.
Right, but I think there's something for everyone. You know, people can find what they're looking for if they look.
Well, Alexis Kennedy, has been such a joy to
Thank
speak
you
to
for
both
being
of you and to
here
read
with
your
us.
books. Thank you for
Yes,
this conversation. Thank you.
Yes, can I say one